Dolphins fans, what is going on today? It's Ben Morgan of the Fins Up Network, and up next on the NFL calendar is obviously free agency. One of the most exciting times of the year. You're getting new guys on your squad. So yes, free agency is up next. Legal tampering begins Monday, March 11th. Players can actually sign on Wednesday, March 13th. So that's what we're discussing today. Miami Dolphins free agent targets, a little bit of a wish list as well for things that we'd like to see, can potentially see happening this upcoming week in free agency. In case you're wondering, I'm going to go kind of almost by like a position by position thing. I'm not going to add our in-house guys right away to that. I'm going to save all of our in-house free agents to the very end. So don't worry, we'll hit on those guys at the end. But before we dive into anything, I want to hear from you. You got your eye on a guy, you got your eye on a couple of guys you'd absolutely love to see the Dolphins target this offseason in free agency, this upcoming week in free agency, I should say. Go ahead, drop them in the comments. Get subscribed if you haven't done so already. Appreciate to all of those who already have done so. I'm going to start by saying the obvious that, yes, free agency it's a super exciting time of the year. You're adding new guys to your roster. You're bringing back some of your own guys. Bound to be exciting once again this year. But I do think it's going to be a little bit different this year. And the obvious reason being our salary cap situation. We're probably not, if you think back a couple of years ago, we're giving out Teron Armstead-like contracts. I don't think we're necessarily going to see that this year, but we do need to fill out our roster at least some, get some pieces in place prior to the draft. And I'm going to hit on that a little bit more here as we get going as well. But let's start with running back Derrick Henry. I did an entire Derrick Henry video already, so I'm not going to do a deep dive on this one. Go back and check that video out after this one. If you would care to do so, I'd appreciate that as well. But yes, there is my interest on the Miami Dolphins end to make this happen. But with all things free agency, it's going to come down to that almighty dollar. Let's get to the area where, yes, I know a lot of you out there, me especially, I want to see at least some of our money spent at this position. And the reason I want some of our money spent here in free agency, it's simple. One, we only have Teron Armstead and Austin Jackson as solidified starters right now signed on the offensive line. Two, that's what I'm talking about. I don't want to go into the draft feeling an absolute need to draft an offensive line early. Do I want to draft an offensive lineman early? 100%. Yes, absolutely. But I don't like the idea of going into round one with more questions than answers on the offensive line. And then you fall into a situation where, remember the Juwan James situation a few years back? Dolphins fans of a certain age will remember that. I don't want a repeat of that. So as you can see, I got a center, I've got a guard included in today's list. That's obviously where the current needs are. Cushenberry is only 26 years old, had a pretty nice career so far with the Denver Broncos. I do sort of think he's going to get a pretty decent contract this offseason. Regardless, we've got a need at center this offseason because right now, if you were to go into the season right now, which obviously that's not realistic. We haven't hit free agency. We haven't hit the draft. But if you're looking at our team right now, who we have under contract, our best in-house option is Liam Eichenberg. I've said enough right there. And then obviously maybe if you go like a stopgap route, you look to draft a guard as well in this draft, then maybe a guy like Zeitler, who's 33, could be an option here. Regardless, I do think we absolutely need to either re-sign some of our own guys or sign some new guys prior to the draft. I've hammered that home enough. Let's go on to the linebackers because obviously recently released Jerome Baker. So linebackers a little bit more of a bigger need now than it would have been had he restructured and stayed in Miami. But if you look at Patrick Queen, he's going to be a popular name due to his ties with new defensive coordinator Anthony Weaver, who spent time in Baltimore, obviously. He's only 24 years old. He has never missed a game. Talk about durability. Talk about something we would like. Never missing a game is a great stat to have. 98 or more tackles every single year, career high 133 last year. He's likely going to have a strong market with those type of numbers. Devin White, also another one of the younger options. He just turned 26. He's averaged 113 tackles per season over his 5-year career, all with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He actually has 23 career sacks as well. He had 9 in 2020. But we talk about how the position of linebacker has been a little bit devalued over the league. However, I do think White is another guy who will have a pretty good market for his services. Lavonte David, he's the old guy. He's the old guy of this trio. He's 34. spent his entire 12-year career with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's had 100 or more tackles in 10 of his 12 seasons. And yes, I say that, but he's likely slowed down a little bit the last couple of years. He was, and I think still is to some capacity, that do-it-all type of linebacker. He used to be really good in coverage. Like I said, he slowed down a little bit, though. He hasn't had an interception in the last 3 years, but he had 12 in his career prior to them. So he'll have suitors, but I don't think he's going to pull the big dollars due to his age. Still a name to monitor based on how Miami wants to move around at the position now that you don't have Jerome Baker. Let's go to some edge rushers. Jadeveon Clowney, I would say that he has operated the last few years in the NFL the way that I imagine that I would if I was in that situation. You know what? Get your footing, make your money, and then just go around signing 1 or 2 year deals with teams that you think are going to compete or cities that you want to live in. Who's going to be the highest bidder at a city that I want to live in of the competing team? And honestly, doing that last year happened to land him in Baltimore with Anthony Weaver as well. So he had 9.5 sacks that last year in Baltimore, which actually tied his career high. But the nice thing about a guy like Clowney is that he can sort of be treated like a stopgap player while our guys recover from injury. Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, since obviously he's proven those are the kind of the deals he's interested in right now. He ain't signing a 4 or 5 year deal. He's signing a 1 or 2 year deal somewhere if history repeats itself. So like I said, you're likely not committing to him long-term, but he's a guy that you can trust as a pass rusher. And he's pretty good against defending the run as well as we work on getting our primary guys back. Uche, he was a guy I actually really liked during the draft prep process back in 2020. He's actually only, I would say, lived up to his draft capital. He was a former second-round pick. Just 1 year so far that he's been in the league. He had 11.5 sacks in 2022. Just 7 sacks the combined other 3 years that he's been in the NFL. But he's another guy that you could kind of see the Dolphins bringing in as that guy that can man the fort and take those snaps while Phillips, while Chubb get healthy. Man, let's talk about defensive backs because there is an absolute array of veteran free agent safeties available. You know what? Which is good news for the Dolphins because there are a lot, and I always want to say this too. There are a lot more available than what I just have listed. I only have the ones listed that I've been informed that the team does indeed have interest in, at least as of when I'm recording this. But let's start with the cornerback. If the Dolphins bring in a guy like Stephon Gilmore, I personally see that kind of move as almost like an insurance policy move for Cam Smith because I do think they drafted Cam Smith in the second last year for a reason. They want him to be the boundary guy that replaces Xavier Howard. But I also think they see a need for, you know what, we probably should have a proven guy just in case. We need to have a proven guy behind Cam Smith just in case. So I've got my eye on Stephon Gilmore there. The safety options, like I mentioned, there's a lot of them. And it's super interesting because we have Javon Holland right now as our only safety that's under contract. So if you're looking at some of the guys on this list, once again, another guy with a history with Anthony Weaver, Geno Stone. Played with Baltimore. Obviously, he's only going to be 25 at the start of this year. His last year was his first year in the NFL getting double-digit starts, and he responded pretty positively with 7 interceptions. So he's created a market for himself. CJ Gardner-Johnson, he's another young guy. He's only 26. He signed a 1-year deal last offseason with the Detroit Lions. Got hurt super early, only appeared in 3 games. So it'll be interesting to see if there's a team out there that wants to commit long-term or if it's going to be, you know what, let's make you do another short-term prove-it type of deal. Like I said, there's an array of safeties. Poyer, Adams, throw Justin Simmons in the mix as well, veteran options that we could potentially be looking at. But as I mentioned, the position of safety for the Miami Dolphins isn't a matter of if we address it, but it's who we address it with because of the reason that we're being in the market for multiple players at that position. I talked about doing some in-house guys, so let's wrap up the video with that. I got a bunch of guys going here on the scroll. Now, this isn't an all-encompassing list of our in-house free agents, but rather a list that I was given outlining the guys Miami at least has interest in bringing back at their price. Let's start with the glaring pieces, in my opinion, and that's the offensive line. Robert Hunt, Connor Williams, Isaiah Wynn, Kendall Lamb. That's 3 interior starters from last year and a tackle that's been relied on fairly consistently over the last couple of years with injuries we've had at tackle. In my opinion, Robert Hunt, I went into this offseason with him being my priority in-house free agent. However, me, like a lot of other Dolphins fans, kind of sad to learn that signs are pointing another way. It looks like he's going to be out of our price range. Well, some of the other guys that signed, with him essentially being the best interior offensive lineman available in free agency, someone's likely going to break the bank. And right now, signs are pointing to that team not being the Miami Dolphins. Connor Williams, he actually seemed like a stretch to be back at one point this offseason, but more recently, it sounds like he may have to take a bit of a smaller deal, kind of due to coming back from another knee injury as well. So it sounds like the team wouldn't mind signing him to a shorter term deal, having him sit until he's get healthy, but then you got that position versatility with him. He can play at center. He can play at guard, depending on what you do at free agency, what you do in the draft, how things are going on the offensive line. In regards to Isaiah Wynn, we didn't get the full Isaiah Wynn experience last year because he got hurt pretty early, but I'd say that he exceeded most people's expectations in the games that he played, which has at least intrigued the Miami Dolphins to bring him back, have him compete for a spot again here this offseason. The main two of the other main two guys, Christian Wilkins, Jerome Baker, these ones are going to be tough. Wilkins being the tougher of the two. I think most people think that there's going to be at least one team that's willing to break the bank for a guy like Christian Wilkins. Baker could be brought back, but it would have to be at our price. So you'd have to see a fairly dry market for a guy like Jerome Baker. But yeah, I think it'll be a bit of a stretch for these guys back. There is interest. They want to bring them back. They want to see how things go with Christian Wilkins before they start really pursuing a lot of other interior defensive linemen. He would be their priority guy. But like I said, money talks in this situation. Andrew Van Ginkel, talk about a fan favorite. Talk about a guy that's giving 100% effort 100% of the time. Always seems to be around the ball in those crucial situations. But another player that, in my opinion, he's actually performed better than anticipated, and good for him because that's created a nice market for himself. And it actually sounds like Vic Fangio is interested in knocking on that door and trying to bring him to Philly as well. So there's obviously going to be competition for a guy like Andrew Van Ginkel. But like I said, there's also a need for the Dolphins at edge right now. The safeties, we already talked about how we only have Holland. So Elliott, Jones, they would at least be familiar faces as well. We'll wrap up with Braxton Berrios, River Craycraft. They're not your game-breaking wide receivers by any means, but we're not necessarily looking for that. We're looking for security blankets. We're looking for chain movers. We already got Waddle. We already got Hill. We just brought in Jonnu Smith. We need some chain movers. We need some familiar faces. We need some security blankets for Tua as well. I think that's what I have got for today. We'll pop this puppy off the screen here real quick. But like I said, who are your targets? Who would you like to see brought in? Go ahead, drop them in the comments. We'll be back doing a recap every day of free agency to talk about who we signed, everything that we can look forward to as well throughout the remainder of free agency. But that is what I have got for today, Miami Dolphins fans. And until next time, Fins